How many people can name this country? It's kind of a random one in northeastern Europe, up in the Baltic Sea. It's kind of off the hidden, usually well-traveled path. But it was in this country that I would have one of the most inspiring and thought-provoking conversations that I've ever had. And years later, that conversation would turn into a bigger story than I could have ever imagined. But how did I get there? This is me, July 4th, 2012, about to hop on a plane with a one-way ticket to Europe. Do we have any future travelers out there? Anybody want to go see the world? Go do it. Promise you it'll change your life. My trip ended up being a 7-month journey all across Europe through about 17 countries and over 50 cities. This is me with my 2 friends that I had just met about a week before and my sister in Italy. We had been traveling around up and down the coast, hanging out, but we were about to split up. I didn't know what I was going to do next. This is about a month into my trip, and I pretty much could have gone anywhere. My friend Joachim on the right-hand side from Sweden says, "You should go to Estonia." I looked at him. Where? I looked up Estonia on the Google Maps. Seemed like a cool place, and I bought a flight. A couple of days later, I showed up in Tallinn, Estonia. I had no idea anything about the country, what it was about, pretty much showed up blindly. I checked into my hostel, did the typical hostel conversations, meeting people, and I was unpacking my bags when another guy walks in. Typically in a hostel, the conversation you usually start off with is, "Hey man, where are you from?" His response would blow me away and was an answer I've never heard before and will probably never hear again. His response? North Korea. We ended up sitting down and talking for an hour and a half about questions. I just started pouring out questions. What was it like growing up in one of the most craziest places in the world? What was it like? What was the economic conditions? How did you live? What did you eat? And just like bombarding him with questions. And luckily, he just answered all of my stuff, telling me stories about how they would eat like a common meal was soup with basically just grass and bark. Much of the country is in a famine, so people are starving there. He talked about how the U.S. and people from the U.S. are kind of painted as these dark archangels with wings. He talked about how him and his mom escaped from the country with 120 other people into China. He never saw any of the 120 people again. They bounced around all across Asia and finally made it to safety because there's actually spies all around that area of the world looking to turn people in back to go to North Korea. The conversation started more as a Q&A. I was just asking and he was answering, but as the conversation developed, it turned more into a dialogue about life. Instead of me wondering and asking questions about lifestyle there, we started sharing and engaging in a thought-provoking conversation about living and what it means to live. And we were both kind of traveling all around trying to figure out our lives. And as the conversation progressed, I realized that even though I'm from Austin, Texas, and he was from North Korea, our lives were actually very similar. We started talking about our families, about our aspirations, what we were trying to do, what's the impact we want to make, what's the legacy we want to leave. And as we dove into the conversation, this theme really struck a chord with me. Over the next 7 months, that conversation repeated itself in various ways. This was me at the running of the Bulls in Pamplona, staying with the national basketball team. So all these guys were on the national basketball team. We had conversations there. This is me in Serbia. I spent a month in Serbia with people that had, in the south of Serbia, with people that had never met Americans before. Didn't speak English, but somehow we were still able to communicate a lot of these same themes that kept showing up in conversations with people from all over. This was in Marrakesh, or in Chefchaouen in Morocco, and this was during Ramadan, so they would play the call to prayer, and it would echo across the whole valley. And over and over again, all across Europe, I had these conversations with people from all different walks of life, people from all different backgrounds, talking about what it means to be a human, what it means to live, what are we trying to do, what is the impact we're trying to make, how do we make a difference. And this idea that each of us is on our own story really stuck with me. So after coming back, I was just like, kept thinking back to the people that I met in the hostels or on the streets, or people that I couch surfed with or hitchhiked with all across Europe. And I realized that over and over again, we had a very similar story. Even though we looked different, we talked different, we came from different backgrounds, our stories at the baseline were very human, and we shared very similar commonalities. I realized that each of us is living our own story. Even though it looks different, it's authentic to ourselves, and we have the opportunity to step into that story. We don't have to copy other people's stories. It's our authentic story. One of the coolest things that I like to do is walking on a plane, and walking down the aisle, I try to take a deep breath, and walking down, I try to look at all the people in a plane. Next time you fly, definitely try it out, because it's so cool to see people of all different walks and how that person got there, why are they going to where they're going, who are they traveling with, and the idea that each of those people, the hundreds of people that are on that plane, have their own story. And you can look at them and kind of get bits and pieces of that just from looking. The other thing I realized is that stories have infinite potential. They're two Olympic flames, and the idea that your story, when shared, doesn't diminish. It actually contributes. So it's not a zero-sum game. We have the opportunity to share stories and both give and take with infinite potential. The coolest thing, I think, is that your story is your story. Sitting here, thinking about what's coming up, what your next steps are, it's amazing to think that you have infinite opportunity to step into that and to really discover who you are, to best use your superpowers, use your story, your background, your education to go out and make an impact. So this idea really stuck with me coming back from traveling, and I kind of did what I think is kind of normal. I decided to grab a can of red spray paint and spray paint it on a wall. This actually happens to be one of the most highest traffic pedestrian walkways in the city. And so I jumped down right over here underneath Mopac, and I spray painted "Live a Great Story" on this pillar. I didn't really realize it, but a couple months later, someone tagged me on Instagram, and a bunch of people had started taking pictures of that same pillar, and the hashtag started developing. And well, that's pretty cool. And I still didn't think too much of it or what was going to happen. But shortly after that, I moved to San Diego, and it was a difficult move because I moved to a new city. I was in a brand new place. I didn't have any friends. I moved to keep pushing my comfort zone, to keep expanding my story, to keep moving forward. And it was not an easy move by any means, but I very consciously made that. But it was still difficult. So I spray painted this "Live a Great Story" once again, more as a personal reminder to myself to keep moving forward, to keep my head up, to keep going. People started taking pictures of this one again. Over and over and over again, it started spreading. People started taking pictures. I kept putting it up. This is actually wheat paste, so it turned from my cursive handwriting into wheat paste, which is essentially like wallpaper mix. And then it grew into the circle logo, and this is the one that's now over Town Lake. It's actually been shared by probably tens of thousands of people at this point. This is Reese Witherspoon a couple of years ago sharing one of the reminders from New Orleans, and then this is Casey Neistat, who recently shared this from the same spot on Town Lake. But why has this simple phrase spread all over? It's kind of simple, it's really basic, but something about the idea of stories really makes an impact on people. It kind of sits deep inside. Many of you have probably seen this around. Maybe you didn't know it was a thing, or you didn't know where you saw it, but it sits kind of subconsciously and inspires people in a very unique way. People have taken it pretty much all over the world. This is from Zion, Machu Picchu. People rock the clothes, take it to the Himalayas. That's at the Mount Everest Base Camp. And people have even gotten it tattooed. We have about 15 tattoos that just show up. People just send us pictures of this, and it's pretty amazing. I actually interviewed the girl that got the first Live a Great Story tattoo the other day, and we got to meet up and hang out. It was a really great experience. But I realized through thinking about the impact that Live a Great Story has made and talking to thousands of people over the last couple of years about stories, is that stories are vital to humanity. They started way back as when we were cavemen, and it was really started around campfires as a way to keep living. It was a very fundamental need to not get attacked by the saber-toothed tiger and to eat the buffalo and these very baseline things for just staying alive. But as stories evolved, we were able to start telling stories about how to not only survive, but to keep moving forward. This is the oldest story. This is a slab. This is the oldest remaining story. This is the Epic of Gilgamesh. So this is 4,000 years old. They found this slab. And this is the transition from not only surviving, but to sharing stories and to thinking about moving forward. This is the oldest, one of the oldest libraries in Vienna. And so we started talking not only about the necessities, but education and thought and the next steps of your story. And then we turn into technology where stories are widely available. It's not only for the top of the top, and it's not only for the higher, the people up in the economy, and it's for everybody. It's widely accessible. We have the opportunity to learn as much as we want, to think about as much as we want, to teach and educate and learn. And the coolest part about that is that now we've moved from kind of the cavemen to the freedom to write our own story and to be the author of our own story. And it's really cool because in a time where we don't necessarily need to worry about the negativity, the income, we can be the person that we want to be, and the biggest impact that we can make is through being the hero of our story. It's through owning who we are, embarking on the journey of moving forward, of thinking about our experience and how we can use that to most make the impact. It's really about being outspoken in your authenticity, because the biggest impact that you're going to make is by being the person that you are and moving down that road. And once you move down that road and you start living a great story, you get a taste for the meaning of life, and you can't go back to being normal. Once you step into that space, you can't go back to what was happening before. Once you own your story and you commit to being the hero of your story, you can't go back to forgettable thread of wasted time. This is Donald Miller. This is one of the seeds that planted the Live a Great Story idea before I went to go travel. And it's written in a lot of our stories. And it really takes me back to that idea that it's a choice. You have to step into your authenticity and go from living according to other people to owning your story and writing your own story. So my question is, what's your story going to be? Make it great. Thank you.